In Apple a Day, sayings about apples are practically worn out, and even at the level of symbology, there are many to be found, including Snow White, William Tell, and Eve, just to mention the most famous stories. Yet the apple is almost never celebrated for its gustatory aspects rather than for its nutritional properties. Thanks to its wide cultivation, this fruit, which perhaps in the collective imagination is the fruit par excellence, has very different characteristics depending on its origin, variety, and also the way in which it is transformed. In our country, there are approximately 2,000 different varieties of apples. They range from the many types grown in Trentino and Alto Adige to ancient apples recovered from near-forgotten orchards. There are the crunchy and juicy ones, as well as the sweet and flowery ones, the small and ugly ones, and the large, round, and shiny ones. Those perfect to be eaten as they are, perhaps even with the peel, and those that are better if cooked. There are even those that should definitely be cooked, unless you want to be left with a dry and acidic taste in your mouth. You may not know it, but the apple, despite being among the first images to take shape in most of our minds when we say fruit, is not actually a fruit. From a botanical point of view, in fact, it is classified as a false fruit. This is because the part of the plant that we consume when we eat an apple is the final part of the flower's stem or peduncle, and not, as it should be, the ovary, which is actually its core. Among the little-known apple varieties that deserve more fame is the spinster apple of Molise. It is a small apple of which very few specimens remain, not only in Molise, but also in Campania and Abruzzo. Perhaps its most important feature is its longevity. This non-fruit, as we have now learned, once harvested, in fact, can hold up in the pantry for several months without being damaged in any way. A very important aspect, and certainly prized, for example, by the shepherds who, in Molise, moved along the sheep tracks for the traditional transhumance of the flocks, the journey that from the local mountains was made in winter to the Apulian plains and traveled in the summer in the opposite direction. The other peculiarity, especially interesting for pastry, is that these apples are very low in pectin, making them suitable for being transformed into candied fruit used in traditional desserts or for modern panettone. The origin of the name is curious. Zitella is the even a little pejorative term for unmarried women. The pulp of these apples was in the past used as a cosmetic and therefore as a device for having more beautiful and attractive skin, a recipe for overcoming the single status of those who used it. The practice of using the peel as an air freshener is curious, albeit without links to the name. As for consumption, however, this apple, like many ancient varieties, is excellent, especially when cooked, perhaps in a classic and soft apple pie. Are you ready? For a proper cake, you must first peel and cut 5 apples into medium small pieces. Meanwhile, in a small pan, melt 150 grams of butter, and when it is liquid, add 5 tablespoons of flour and 5 of sugar and mix well. Now remove from the heat and add 3 eggs, one at a time. Then add the apples and, if you like, a handful of raisins soaked in warm water. Now dissolve a sachet of yeast in a little milk and add it to the dough. Mix well, complete with a pinch of salt, then place in a pan and bake at 170 degrees Celsius for an hour. Let cool, unmold, and serve with a little icing sugar on the surface.